Hello, my name is Ariane Jet Seals, and I am the owner and coach and consultant for Holistic Rise. I wanted to create a brief overview of a presentation that was developed from a paper. It has continued to gain attention, and I've been excited today after being notified that there were 30, over 30 downloads for the month of December from several universities across the world. There were several from the United States. There's one from Switzerland. There's one from Italy. There's one from India, and many more, but it's very exciting. However, I feel like I am not only doing myself an injustice by not developing this further, or at least providing information on how I've been working to develop it further, but as well as to the individuals who have been using my work to further their programs and further develop some of the things that they have been working on with their students and their clients. So I wanted to do a quick overview on holistic advising. And I want to do that kind of quickly as a pre thing, because then I'm going to come back and I'm going to further develop it out with some of the research that I've been gathering and the work that I've been doing over the last few years, because this paper and presentation is, I would say, outdated at this point. I agreed with folks when I was working on this that I was a little ahead of my time when I did it. And so it gained most of its attention during COVID. So during and after COVID was when it gained most of its attention. But I feel like I have learned and done a lot more with this work during COVID and since then. So I think that it is only appropriate to be able to include that information. So for those who have not had an opportunity to actually see the presentation or hear me present on it, I want to make sure that I do that in this space. And then I will create another presentation, and I will include that on the site and have a link to that as well, so that folks can see the intro to that as well. I can be reached on some links that I will provide at the end of this presentation. I chose to do this pre-recorded rather than live, just because I'm going to be going through it kind of quickly. So I appreciate your interest and the information that I've been gathering, that you're interested, but I refuse to just continue to give y'all the same information that I feel like is outdated at this point. I want you to take what you can and what you would like from this, and start to use it as you will. But I do want to hear from you on the more updated information and research that has been obtained since I've done this presentation and this talk. I have had the opportunity to sit on several committees at the state level, and we have done a lot of amazing work that has advanced the work that I do full time at the university with retaining students. And a lot of that work is not just about higher education. A lot of that work is also about um, uh, clients and the people that we serve, which is why I love the work that I do and how I've been able to tie it in, because it is a combination of human services and education tied together. into one, which are definitely my areas of expertise. They're the areas that excite me. They're the areas that interest me. I have a background in human services, have been a master's level social worker for some time now. I have a master's of science in social work. And I studied wellness, I studied mental health, and have credentials in those areas as well. So I've realized that tying those into the work that I've always done has truly been helpful with retaining people. So whether that is retaining your clients, whether that is retaining your employees, or in this case, retaining students. I've done this in the public school system as well as higher education in both community college setting and then a state university. So let's get into the presentation itself. Oh, let's see. Let's, let me switch it out. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So, as I had shared before, the presentation is entitled Holistic Advising, and I have used holistic advising as a proactive intervention for success. A lot of times in the work that we do, we are very reactive. And, naturally, if there's not something there, then there's nothing to treat, right? So if you go to the car shop, you say, hey, my check engine light was on, and something was there, and they're gonna say, well, you know wait till it comes back on, because if it's the light is not on, there are no codes that are currently present for us to read. If you go to the doctor and you say, hey, I was experiencing these symptoms, or this what's going on, they're gone now, but they come every once in a while. The doctors may be able to check you out, but they may not be able to find or see what is going on if the symptoms do not persist or they're not presently there. And, a lot of the things that I focus on when it comes to holistic living, holistic work, it is not just waiting for the symptoms to present themselves. I like to look at ways that we can be proactive in our intervention. And so, when it comes to, car maintenance, which I make a lot of references to, we can do some things along the way. We can listen and pay attention to some different noises, or maybe the car rides differently and things like that, and start anticipating what may be going on, or making sure that we're keeping on top of our care and our maintenance when it comes to our bodies before we get a fever, before, we've got the upper respiratory infection. We can also make sure that, it's a certain time of year, or maybe, the kids around you are sick or something. Know that, okay, this is probably a time that, I really need to make sure that I'm eating well, I'm getting some vitamins in, that I'm exercising, that I'm resting. There are some proactive interventions that we can exercise before we actually have something that we need to treat. Okay. So in looking at the expectations, so those who attended this workshop, the goal was for them to be able to define holistic advising, identify key features of holistic advising, identify potential risk factors of student success, and begin a plan of adaptation. The session introduced all of the process and effectiveness of this particular form of advising. And we discussed the student as a whole, looking at their personal, emotional, cultural, financial, and familial issues before anything could become a barrier and negatively influence their educational success. The goal was to create a plan of action in holistic advising to apply to their practice. Now, mind you, in the workshops that have been presented, there have been a mix of faculty members, advisors, principals, guidance counselors. So we have had attendees from all different levels of education: elementary school, middle and high school and college are most common and popular for individuals who are coming to listen to the presentation. So high school and college, and those roles that each individual played were very different. So looking at advising, advising is a process in which an advisor and advisee enter a dynamic relationship respectful of the student's concerns. So ideally, the advisor serves as the teacher and the guide in an interactive partnership aimed at enhancing the student's self-awareness and fulfillment. So this came from O'Banion, and it was an academic advising model. And so I broke some of that down, and we're looking at their traditional way of advising. When you go to the advisor and they look at, what are your life goals? Are there some vocational goals to explore? And then now we're going to look at your program of choice, because it's great. You go into this college system or university system, then you got to narrow things down. Once you've picked that program or that degree or that certification that you want to attain, then that's how you decide on the courses that make the most sense. And then you start getting those courses scheduled. It is that time of year. Got a lot of congestion going on, you guys, so my apologies. Advising. So when we look at advising and how, there's a lot of different steps to it, and it can look very differently, but it is very vital when it is done well and when it is done correctly, to a student's success. And because of what I do full time, and then what I do with my business, I always have to bring it back to advising, can be outside of an academic arena. Okay. So let's all keep that in mind. But advising takes place in situations in which an institutional representative gives insight or direction to a college student about an academic, social, or personal matter. So again, in this situation, I was speaking to individuals who worked in the academic arena, but this can also, the very same work, I did the very same work when I worked as a domestic violence advocate, and I would, have conversations with my clients about their goals, the things that they were facing and they were dealing with, and, was able to provide some counsel and coaching, and maybe, some opportunities for teaching when, we'd have group sessions and everything. So this, again, it can be adapted. So the nature of this direction might be to inform, suggest, counsel, discipline, coach, mentor, or even teach. So the historical foundations of academic advising provided a really great article on what advising looked like in their realm. Okay. So we just want to look at, how advising has adapted over time. Now let's look at holistic, because if I come in and I'm talking about holistic advising, and you guys, when I started talking about holistic advising and holistic this back in 2016, when I started these conversations, people were open to the conversations, but it wasn't gaining as much attention as it has over the last several years. So this may not be new to a lot of people, but it was very important to review so that folks could understand at that time the importance of reviewing the whole student. And so we needed to look at what holistic actually is. And in a definition that was found, it shows that it's characterized by the belief that the parts of something are intimately interconnected and explicable only by reference to the whole. So it means that I cannot define this thing without taking the whole of it into account, right? So if we look at the picture that I have provided, it shows emotional, physical, sociocultural, financial, environmental, occupational, spiritual, and intellectual areas of our lives. If we're going to look at what is going on with Arion, let's say I'm your client, I'm your student, and something that I have always been very open about, it is why I do the work that I do, and it is my journey and my testimony. I deal with an autoimmune condition. When I was a student and even as a professional, I could not just go to the doctor and say, hey, I'm having a flare up. This is what's going on. And then they just treat me. I found the best physicians that I still have, but the best physicians started to ask questions. So when I would experience a flare up, one of the first questions that is asked of me now, because I'm not a student at this time, is a question about my occupation. So, what does your work days look like? What does your load look like? What is your stress level? How much weight are you carrying on your own? The next question would be, socio-cultural, what is your support system looking like? Are you sharing with your spouse or your children or your loved ones, the support that you need? Is anyone able to take on and assist with this? They're looking at the overall environmental, what environments are you in as a whole? Are you resting well? Are you exercising for the physical? Like, what is your diet looking like? I do conversations and help individuals, and we talk about nutrition. I am not a nutritionist. This is something that I've learned from my own studies. But I had developed a diet for myself to follow with a list of pro-inflammatory versus anti-inflammatory foods. And it helped me to figure out, how I might eat throughout the day, especially like during the holidays or times we were traveling, so that I don't cause an inflammation, right? Emotionally, am I overwhelmed? Am I stressed out? Are my relationships satisfying? So my physicians that I felt like were doing it well, they were really starting to peel back the layers of what was going on with this chronic inflammation that was taking over my eyes and in other parts of my bodies, began to ask the important questions, because it couldn't just be, oh, we're going to look at just this eye that's having a problem, because then it went into the other eye. So we needed to focus on the person, the whole person, and ask and look at all of these different pillars. And so traditionally, when I had the conversation, I look at the 8 pillars of wellness. So that is what we're looking at here. So if you have a student, you have a client that shows up and they're not doing well, they're not performing well, you have to have more conversations than just, you're failing at this class, or, I understand you're struggling. Let me just throw a bunch of resources at you without knowing exactly what those resources are. So we have to look at the different areas to sort out what's going on. We cannot just look at one area without taking the other areas into consideration. Oh, that's fun. Okay. So looking at holistic advising, it is a developmental process that focuses on the whole student, taking into consideration all the complexities of a person. So all the things that I just shared, and then think about what it looks like to be a student. I have children in elementary school. I have a middle schooler that is on his way to high school, and I have worked in higher ed for some time now. And each level of education brings on its own experiences. The children are at different stages of their lives and they're all different. So don't count out the elementary folks, because you all elementary drama and emotions and hormones are just as heavy as they are for the middle school, high school. But you have to look at all the complexities of that person. So don't count out your little elementary schoolers. They got a lot going on. There are life circumstances or emotions or thoughts and things that are going on. They're developing their interests and they have different physical feelings and health things that they're navigating as well. So this goes across the board for everyone. So you have to look at the whole of the student. So student challenges, I've started kind of listing some of these off. So what do some of these challenges look like? They can be academic difficulties. We put in there being underprepared, because that is a common thing that was seen. We have students, I see it all the time, that enter into the higher education system and they are not prepared, whether it is academically or emotionally, they're not prepared. So that presents a challenge. Adjustment and transition issues. It is real. It is real. It is a lot. We have a lot of in-state students that will attend a university that's maybe just a couple of counties over. And they may have their own adjustment and transition issues. Then consider the student that is coming from another state, that is coming from another country. There's a lot of adjustment and transition things to take into account. Is there some cultural adjustments that are happening? Are there some, some food adjustments? Is it a roommate? Maybe I've been the only child. People don't consider these things. Maybe I've been the only child, and I have a two-parent household, and it has been my two parents, and I have all these needs met. And now, I am in a residential hall, and I share a room with two or three other individuals. Maybe I have been in a single household with a single parent, and it has just been the two of us, and it's been just a very tight-knit thing. And now I'm around all these people. There are a lot of different adjustments that have to happen, and we don't take that into consideration enough. I think a lot of the folks that I work with in residence life do an amazing job at understanding and having talks and conversations and partnering with the counseling center and stuff to address the concerns and acknowledge that there are a lot of transition and adjustments that are going to occur. Then we'll look at finances. Not everyone that comes on to a university's campus or a college system's campus has all of their financial needs met. They look very different for everyone. And I see it at all different ends of the spectrum. It could be, I have come from a very low income family. I am solely depending on what financial aid provides me, to a student whose parents have a higher income and they don't qualify for financial aid. Their parents are paying out of pocket for tuition and have said, that's all you get, paying your tuition, that's it. What these students often have in common is they have a very similar struggle, and that is my tuition is paid, but I still got to get books. I've got these other fees. I have to live. I need a meal plan. Am I going to live off campus? I still want to have a life. I still want to do other things, so am I going to get that cell phone? Do I need a car? So there's a lot of other pieces that happen. And then there's also the issue of just not having enough to even pay the tuition. So there are financial things that happen that leads to a lot of the things that I address across the state and at my current university. And that is just making sure that the basic needs are met, whether it's food, or housing, or medical, because, money doesn't fix everything, but it's very helpful when you have enough, right? Because you can get that doctor's appointment, you can pay your rent, you can buy those groceries. So, there are conversations that I have with students and linking them to resources and employment opportunities and programs that will offer support financially, because when that financial struggle starts to happen, it's very difficult to focus on a lot of other things. Then there's a lack of commitment. Sometimes the students just aren't mature enough yet. Sometimes it is that their parent has told them that this is what they're going to do. Sometimes it is familial pressures that have said, you're going to go to school to be a dentist. You're going to go to school to be a teacher. This is what we do. This is the family business, or this is our legacy. This is what you will do. And so you will see that there is not a lot of commitment there because they've not bought into that. It's not what they truly want to do. So that is another area of challenge that is seen often. I've already mentioned maturity. I think it goes hand in hand with the lack of commitment. Um, we have students that come on to university campuses at 17, 18, 19 years old. And I said that they're expected to make adult decisions, but they're still figuring out this thing called adulting. Heck, I'm sometimes still figuring out this whole adulting thing. So, it is a lot that they are processing and learning all at one time. Then there's poor integration with the college community. Just as I had showed in the slide before, your sociocultural dynamics, that piece of your whole wellness is vitally important. If you're not integrated, you could feel isolated, you'll feel alone, you don't feel connected, and that can cause a lot of issues and concern when you're struggling, when you're dealing with, regular difficulties as a student or regular difficulties in life. If you do not feel like you have that connection on campus and that you're not just integrated, you will be around a lot of people and still feel alone. And that's a really heavy thing to deal with. Then we have to look at relationships. It ties into some of what I said before. If you are leaving friends behind somewhere, that's difficult, especially, when it's been some of that, romantic type relationships. When it's, siblings and parents and caregivers, grandparents, as caregivers, we often see across the state, but maybe they have had to put some distance between relationships. Maybe some relationships have ended. Maybe they've been so used to having certain people around them that when they get to the college setting, that it is difficult for them to develop new relationships or learn people and, navigate what that looks like. It's a lot, to go into developing new relationships. And now you're not only looking at developing relationships with peers or classmates, you're looking at developing relationships with advisors, with your faculty members, with the program coordinators. All of these relationships are important, but it's a lot to manage. And then lastly, just for the sake of this presentation, I have the undecided academic and career goals. That is a major challenge because if you are still undecided, it is very difficult to focus, on your studies, to complete a course, to complete your advising when you still don't know what your ultimate goal is. It's going to be difficult for some to truly apply the level of commitment that is needed. And so we often have to have students referred for academic coaching, career counseling, and having further conversations to help them to process and develop a plan of all the areas that they're interested in and get their feet wet and experience some courses, maybe complete some shadowing, which I've done a lot of recommendations for students to do shadowing, as well as some interviewing from professionals in different areas that may interest them to pursue as a career. So again, this data it's outdated. I'm going to make sure that this is updated. Again, I am doing this presentation as a pre-presentation before I give a preview of what the more updated presentation and information and statistics look like in more recent times. So at this time, the college student dynamics were almost 50% attended a community college. Of those attending community college, more than 60% could not afford to go full-time because of a lack of finances, because of a gap in funding. More than 60% had to be part-time students. 40% worked at least 30 hours a week. 25% worked full-time while going to school full-time. 25% of students were older than 25 years old, and 25% were single students. And again, this is older numbers, and this was pulled from the New York Times 2017. So we're looking at August 2017. This is what the data looked like for that time. Okay. I do want to point out almost 50% attending community college. There have been a lot of information there, and even increase in community college that I'll be including in the new presentation. And it's the cost of attendance. The cost of attendance, satellite campuses, more hands-on services and programming for students, especially those who are considered non-traditional. So I will look at expounding on why the community college student population has continued to grow. So I want to look at today's college student. Again, I'm saying today's college student. Y'all see the numbers. Y'all see the numbers in the years from which this data was pulled. We've got Urban Institute study. So they did a study. They pulled data from 2011 to 2015. And then they presented the data, and I think this same data came out in 2016, 2017. But according to that study, 1 in 5 college students struggled, community college students struggled with maintaining food in their home. Okay. The next study, in an American College Health Association report released in 2011, students noted depression and anxiety as top obstacles to their educational and personal goals. There's a breakdown in the picture there that shows feeling overwhelmed, feeling exhausted, too depressed to function, and then seriously considered suicide. Now, this data continues to look very similar, which is why a lot of campuses have taken on more programming that is wrapped around mental health and well-being of our students. And so we'll talk more about that in the updated presentation. So looking at college students at this time, a high number of students were going to college unprepared, as I showed. And during this time frame, you can see that there is a breakdown of what the percentages look like. A percentage of all first-time students placed in what was called at that time remedial courses. We have developmental courses, courses that are not counting towards the actual degree. Okay. So now let's look at the persistence to graduate. Let's look at what those numbers look like. The 6-year graduation rate was 59% at public institutions at this time, 66% at private nonprofit institutions, and 23% at private for-profit institutions. Approximately 50% of students completed a bachelor's degree by 2015 at the same institution where they began in 2009. So again, this data was updated during 2017 when I did this particular presentation at they've changed the name of the conference now. It used to be the National Youth at Risk Conference. And because of the words, they've changed that conference title. But for the sake of 2017, that's where that data came from then. According to the National Center for Educational Statistics in 2011, which was one of the last times before this presentation was done that they did this report, 23% of full-time students who entered a four-year institution for the first time in 2008 did not remain in their college in the subsequent fall semester. So a lot of us begin to wonder why. A lot of universities and colleges have retention committees. They want to go in and figure out, why are we not retaining these students? What do these students actually look like? How do we address these concerns of this 23% of students who were full-time? Why are they not here? What happened? So start looking towards solutions. We see issues as they present, and we have to be creative. We cannot continue to do things the same way that we've done them. That's a lot of the conversation that I've had at my previous institutions and my current institution, as well as on the state committees, which, we have folks from multidisciplinaries, different disciplinaries, I think come together very well, because we're looking at solving the problem solving, addressing the concerns from different areas. My area that I bring in is that I have a background in both human services and education. So I bring that to the table. Then we have advisors, we have guidance counselors, we have instructors, we have program coordinators and directors. We have folks from financial aid. We have people from all different areas that come together to look at how we can do this, better. We've come a very long way, but looking at some time ago, we looked at academic advising. And here I said, it is the people who come face to face with students on a regular basis who provide the positive growth experiences for students that enable them to identify their goals and talents and learn how to put them to use. The caring attitude of college personnel is viewed as the most potent retention force on a campus. And so when I began to speak with students and we have conversations about this, and there have been many surveys that I have been able to see and have been a part of, and the information has really remained that when students have come across someone who has shown genuine care and concern, that is what increased that student's potential to be retained. When someone took the time to have a conversation, when someone took the time to sit with the student who was crying and overwhelmed, when someone took the time to walk a student to the next office and say, this student is in need of support and help, and I want to make sure they get here, it has allowed for the students to feel seen, to feel heard, genuinely cared about. And again, as I've said, that this has been adapted for different areas and different fields. And so this is the same for any time you have a client. Again, going back to my journey with my health and wellness, when I have had a physician who has sat with me, who has reviewed recent research and articles about the condition that I have faced, that has sat with me and looked at other physicians that may be able to provide a second opinion, or that could confirm what my physician was already believing was going on, and asking, how is the medicine making you feel? How is this working for you? This has retained me as a patient at this physician's office. Not only has it retained me as a patient at their office, but when the physician had not been in their office and they were at one of their satellite offices and I needed to be seen quickly, instead of just seeing whoever was available at that local office that I could drive to 10 or 15 minutes away from my home, I have driven an hour and a half, 2 hours away to see that same physician. That physician has retained me. And so I joke all the time, and my husband says it to him, you do know, like, if you just pack up and move, like, you got to tell us, we're going to end up wherever you are, because yes, I am probably going to follow my retina specialist wherever he goes. So, but it is because of the care and the concern and the dedication that has been provided to me. So this is the same, like I said, this can be adapted across different fields. And so we have to present the same way for our clients and for our students to retain them. Yes, we have issues and problems. They're going to happen, right? We say life be life, and life is going to do what it does. But when you have someone that you know is there in your corner, someone's going to have your back, someone's going to be there to provide you resources and information, then a lot of the students feel more prepared to be able to take on those challenges. In my roles, my full-time role, I coordinate a program that is supposed to help students meet their basic needs, that is supposed to help students to overcome all of those non-academic barriers to their success. But because of the genuine care, because of the rapport that is built with these students, and because they know that in a former life that I have been an advisor, because I've done career counseling, because I'm a social worker, I will have students that will show up, that will call, that will email, and it will have nothing to do with, hey, what are the food resources? It will have nothing to do with not being able to pay their rent, because they feel like I am a safe person. They feel like I genuinely care for them, and they know that I am not going to leave them out there to just figure some things out on their own. So it's very important. It's very important. So looking at solutions again, so student support services is one of the areas that we look at with student-facing programming. Is vital because the research shows that academic intervention programs that include tutoring, academic advising, counseling programs have at least a modest effect with helping students overcome pre-college academic deficiencies and associated disadvantages. And so one of the things that I have been working on and having conversations about over the last several years is not waiting for those students to get to higher education to then throw all these tutoring programs and do academic coaching and career counseling and then, mental health counseling. Like, how can we start to work with our middle schools and our high schools before the students even get here, which is a lot of the conversations that have been happening when I do this workshop. And those folks from the public schools institutions, they would start to have these conversations. How can we do this? In the state of Kentucky, we have Family Resource Youth Service Centers. I had the pleasure of being a Frisky myself for about 5 years. And while I feel like we take on everything, we would do a little bit of everything. I feel like my role, what I do here at my current university, is very similar to what the Family Resource Youth Service Center coordinators or Friskies in the state of Kentucky would do. And we would look at providing programming through the school setting to retain students, but also to prepare them for college or career once they had reached high school graduation and beyond, right? So if we could start looking at how we can provide some of these things beforehand, we could address some of these deficiencies and disadvantages. A lot of universities and programs do a lot of this. So we have a lot of different TRIO grants and programs where students are invited if they meet eligibility to different universities. So I know Eastern Kentucky University does one. Kentucky State University has a program. I'm also aware that Bluegrass Community and Technical College, BCTC, has a program in which they have, I think it's 8th graders, so 8th grade through high schoolers can come and participate in some of these student support services programs that are funded by some TRIO programs. They get an opportunity to experience what college looks like, what college classes look like, being on a campus, living on a campus, just all of these different pieces as a preventative, measure or I say proactive intervention to some of these concerns that we discussed. We cannot wait for the issues to happen, right? We have to go ahead and start introducing them to the real life of being on a college campus. It's great to visit a college campus. I'm not going to discourage that at all, but you're only seeing a glimpse of it, right? It's like when you buy a house, you drive through the neighborhood that one day, and you look at the house. Oh, it's great, it's amazing. But anybody who has, bought a house before or even rented a house, that you're going to be there for some time, you're not going to drive through that neighborhood in one time. You're going to drive through in the morning, you're going to drive through in the evening, you're going to go on the weekends, you're going to figure out what the neighborhood actually looks like, what the neighbors are actually like. You're going to really get a good feel of what it looks like, right? So that's the same thing, when you go into some of these settings, you give these young folks an opportunity to have several different experiences early on. They have a better idea of what to expect. The same idea is the whole backing of a nonprofit organization that my husband has been running and preparing students for the ACT. A lot of people say, oh, we do the practice exam, we do the practice, and it's done in school, and it's done. It's great. It's great if that works. But a lot of students needed to be in that real situation. They needed to know what it looked like to be on time. They needed to know what it looked like to take an exam in a place that was not your classroom, that was not your teacher. They needed to know, all of the rules and regulations, and it may not be your friend that's sitting next to you that's going to give you a fist bump or a wink like you got this, whatever. Like they have to really experience what this looks like for real, and then get exposed to it multiple times and then build up, their stamina, build up their confidence, build up, create that experience for them is great. To create the experience for them is great. But to expose them to the real life experience multiple times kind of allows them to get those jitters out. They've experienced it. It's not something new. It is something that they have done before and they know that they can do it, right? So the same thing goes for those programs. A celebrating opportunity. I'll share briefly with this. This is a program that was at the community college 2014, 2015, and it was there for about 4 years. And in that program, we had students who were not testing into college level courses. So the courses that they tested into for like reading, writing, math, they were just below college ready. So there was a lot of preparation that needed to go on there. A lot of the students were pursuing their GED while pursuing their college credentials. And as the coordinator of that program, I walked into this. I was very intrigued by it because those who know me, and I've already said on here, my passion is bringing together human services and education and figuring out how to make that work for the whole person, right? And so having had that opportunity, redid some of the grant. We got some different funding in place to address some financial hurdles of students. We looked at, how classes needed to be prepared and set for the class schedules. We looked at different programs and after-school events. We looked at what did our students' basic needs look like? Transportation, childcare, food, were they able to pay their rent? Looked at all of these pieces. And so what I found was that the students had a lot of similar issues. So created some funding streams, created partnerships with Community Action Council, who had a child care facility on site, created partnerships with Goodwill Industries, who opened up classrooms for a satellite classroom for students who just couldn't get to us. We worked with Fayette County Public Schools programs and alternative school to get students who were about to just sign themselves out or their parents were going to sign them out of the public school system. How do we do a good transition from that school system over into the college programming and make sure that we had wrapped them in resources. Another thing that I did with that program that I want to share that received a lot of attention was we began to see a decline in applications, and students were not applying. We were trying to learn what exactly was going on. So I had an intake survey that was sent out to anybody who had showed interest, who had been online, who had maybe applied but didn't sign up for courses. Like, what does that look like? What are all the things that you are worried about? And so from the information from those who replied, what it did was all of those things that were in the picture that I showed you before. If I could go back to, if I knew the slide, I would just go back to it. But that I showed you before with the wellness wheel, so those 8 pillars of wellness, I contacted I contacted about 20, but I had about 16 or 17 different agencies that were both local to the county as well as state who came in. They were from housing. They were from medical and like state Medicaid, Medicare. We had representatives from food banks and state food resources like SNAP benefits. We had individuals who were there that could provide assistance on child care assistance, completing those applications. We had individuals like Jubilee Jobs who could show that they had opportunities for individuals who were looking for employment, and Goodwill Industries. We had so many different industries and agencies that were there. Like I said, there were about 16 or 17 who showed up. Now, what I did was I created like, I don't know if some of you all did it when you were in school, but we had to do like a reality day, and you go through the day and connect with all these different resources and programs and jobs and life experiences, whatever. And then you got to figure out like how you're going to live at the end, right? Well, this was not exactly that, because that kind of, yeah, um, it was good and bad. But this was a basic needs open house. And I had all of those agencies, and we had 2 classrooms now that were combined together, and we pulled back the dividers, and it was a nice setting. Individuals started and they went through all of the resources that were available. And what I stood at the door and talked about and asked was, if you could think about all the things that are currently preventing you from enrolling, if you could think of all the things that are currently preventing you from accomplishing that educational goal that you want, whether it's a certificate, whether it is a diploma or degree, what is standing in your way? Think about that, write it down on this note card, explore all of these resources in there, write down a resource that you believe that is in this room that can help you tackle that issue or that problem that you're either currently facing or you're going to be facing, right? So a current problem, yes, is very easy. I'm currently dealing with transportation. I know that transportation is an issue. That's great. We had lecture in there. We had conversations about, passes and the student passes and the grants and the programs that we can have for those. But how about the conversation of, hey, got children, and I know that school is going to end. Maybe it's the spring semester. School is going to end, and I don't currently have childcare for the summer. They're just in school right now. So that's going to be an obstacle. It's going to be a hurdle, and I won't be able to take classes during that time. So then that individual would have the opportunity to go and speak to those couple of agencies that were there that represented child development or child care agencies, and have a plan in place so they could be prepared when May came and our school system dismissed their kids for the summer. What type of camps, activities, child care assistance could be available to their families? So when individuals went through the resource fair, they got to the end, and at the end, I drove some of the folks in registrar and everything a little crazy that day, but they trusted me, so I thank them for that. We had old school hard copy applications. I did not want for technology or devices to be an issue or a problem, and I wanted everyone to be able to sit there together. We had tables with pens and hard copy applications, and they completed applications. When we did that program, and I thank my superiors and my leadership at Bluegrass Community and Technical College during that time because they trusted me to be able to do something that was a bit out of the box, that was taking a little bit of old school stuff, a little bit of new school stuff, and they trusted me to be able to do this. And with having individuals that trusted me to be able to do this, we had not only the most applications completed for our institution, but we had the most applications completed for an institution within this entire network. And at that time, we had 17, I think it was 17 colleges and universities across the country who were participating in this. So that was really exciting for us. The next thing when I developed out Accelerating Opportunity that we looked at was, again, those wraparound services. So everything that I did as a Frisky, everything that I do in my current role, I did in that role. And that was looking at what the students would need to persist. Looks like my screen is a little blurry. So give me 1 second so I can fix that. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's not so blurry anymore. Um, Hopefully that works. Presentation. Mhm. Oh, since I'm here, this is good. Since I'm here, we'll go back to the emotional, physical, social, cultural, financial, environmental, occupational, spiritual, intellectual. So all of those different areas. So as I was talking about doing that resource fair, I had representatives from almost all of these different areas that were available, that were there in that resource fair. Or as I refer to it as a basic needs fair is what we called it when I did it in my current institution, but as a resource fair, so that we had about 16 or 17 agencies from outside of that college, but we also had some different areas from within the college, so like the counseling center, the tutoring center, those are different areas to meet, have someone available to meet all of the different components of wellness. Okay. Let's get back to where we are. Sorry about that. So, okay, yeah, talking about accelerating opportunity. So, in developing that program out further, looking at combining the human services aspect with the educational aspect. I worked with the students. When I did their advising, I did very much this. I did holistic advising because my students were not your traditional students. My students came in with presenting issues. They came in with struggles. They came in knowing that there was going to be a struggle down the line. They came in knowing that there were going to be issues of financial insecurity, of food insecurity, of housing insecurity. They came in just like that. So I knew in order for my students to be successful, I needed to have resources and things in place for them. So when I did the advising for my students, it was not just a conversation of how is your class going? What does academics look like? What does the class size look like? How is that working for you? It was, how are you feeling when you're in this class? How is that working for you? What is the time frame doing? How are you managing your schedule with your life schedule, your family obligations, your job obligations? We're looking at all the pieces of it. If I can help to connect them with the resource, a service, or a program that is going to alleviate some of that weight, I'm going to connect them to that resource and that information and make sure that they have it, not to coddle, not to baby, but arm them, equip them with information and resources that can help them to be self-sufficient so that they can continue to persist, so that when problems arise, as they will, they have a resource that is available to them. They have a resource that they can connect with and continue on in their goal or their pursuit towards that certificate or that diploma or that degree. So that was a celebrating opportunity in a nutshell. So I'm going to look at the value and effectiveness of holistic advising. So due to its culturally responsive nature, holistic advising has been noted to improve the persistence of racial and ethnic minority students in PWIs. So in those predominantly white institutions, when students have received that thorough, holistic interaction, it has been shown to improve their persistence. That matters. Advisors providing a humanistic approach to advising were seen as helpful. They were seen as caring and accessible. So it wasn't just, I got this 15 minutes, got a 15-minute block of time, or I got to go in here and rattle off these are the classes I'm going to take, and I'm going to release a hold. No, there was a conversation. There was, an interaction. There was a process of relationship building. Okay. And this was seen as very much valuable and effective in retaining students. Also look at the positive impacts that it had on student engagement. Students were more likely to engage. Not only were they retained, but the engagement increased the likelihood of them being retained. They were more likely to participate in programs, in activities. They were more likely to volunteer with their college, with the different programs or student organizations when they had these types of interactions. It is shown that it has greatly increased levels of student success in their classes academically and on campus as well as off campus as they continue their pursuit of their higher education and career goals. It motivated students who were undecided and unsure. It showed that it assisted in providing stronger academic pathways for students because they really had an opportunity to really engage in their areas of interest. And it wasn't just something that was quickly reviewed and done, and I just got to get this done. There were intentional conversations that allowed them to really have some good, strong academic plans in place. And then lastly, I have here more effective with assisting students in setting strong educational, but also life and career goals, because we want students to set educational goals. But as I said before, we have to know what their career goals are before we even look at the educational goals. We also need to know what they want out of their life, right? When I started as a student, I, for a very long time, wanted to go into a particular field. I won't even go into all that right now. Wanted to go into a particular field, but the more mature I got and the more I realized what it would take for me to work in that field, I knew that that was not something that I wanted to do. I didn't want to do it like that. It still involved very much wellness. It still involved very much caring for others, but I had to find a way to do that without being absent as much as I had learned that particular field would require of me. I wanted a family. I come from a pretty large family. Family is very, very important to me. I wanted to have children. And towards the end of my years of being in higher education, I had my godson living with me. And so I was already navigating as a single parent, as a caregiver, and I wanted to be present for him. And then, I have 3 children now, one through kinship care, and then 2 biological children. I want to make sure that my god kids, those kids that are mine through love, those kids that are mine by birth, that they all have, a good portion or representation of me in their life. And that mattered. And so, I had to figure out what my life goals looked like before I could even navigate the educational career goals. So looking at the whole student, looking at the whole person will allow that person to be able to navigate more stronger plans and a stronger purpose for what those plans and goals actually are. Oh, I can't forget this. I'll share this. So there was an article, and it was Musaeus and Ravello. They researched the characteristics of academic advising that contributed to the success of what is labeled as racial minority students at PWIs. And so that is where some of that information came from, if anybody wants to look back at that. So what does it look like? What does it look like? If I said, okay, holistic advising, we've never quite done that before, and this is the way we do things. At the current institution that I'm at, we actually have advisors who work with their colleges, but then we have some who work with their student success department. And so sometimes it looks a little different, right? And advising and the way that we do it can really be effective when we change it up just a little bit. So we look at, an initial session and how does that look? Have an introductory conversation, you do an intake assessment, set expectations, and schedule follow-up. When I first started introducing the idea of doing an intake assessment, I had a lot of folks that were like, we got a lot going on enough, as it is as an advisor. And again, all of this weight doesn't even have to fall on the advisors. We can have different, individuals and programs that as they have expanded over the years who can do some of the same work. But an intake assessment should be had because we need to know the background of that student. We spent all this time talking about the whole person, the whole student. We need to know what that looks like. It does us no good to schedule a student with 12, 15, 18 credit hours and then not have a conversation of, are you able to have all your bills met? Are you able to make ends meet? Because what happens is those students end up in my office. They have all these classes and all these hours, but they cannot make ends meet. So they have to go get a job or they have to get extra hours. And now it is more difficult to maintain the course hours that they've committed to and the new hours that they have had to take on so that they can pay their rent. So these different conversations could and should be had so that you have that is less likely that the student will have to drop a course, the student have to repeat a course, or going to just struggle through that course through the whole semester. So doing these intake assessments is very helpful to be able to do it up front. Also, one of the things that I've done both in public school and in higher ed in the intake assessment is to get the contact information again from students. We see it all the time. And this is something that I did with the public school system and the school that I worked in, and we found that it worked really well as an indicator of whether a student's family was struggling with housing, security, or financial difficulties. Because the phones would often be disconnected and they have a new phone number or there'd be a new address frequently. So you want to look at that. If you have that with the student that you are meeting with, they have consistently new phone numbers, as simple as that sounds, that is an indicator there's some financial difficulties going on there. If there's address changes or they say, I don't have a mailing address right now, couch surfing, which I do not like that term because I feel like that it minimizes what a student's experience actually is a lot of times. But a lot of the students, they're couch surfing. So they don't really have an address, or they're changing the address for every friend's, home that they stay at. So we want to look at that because once we pay attention to that, and if students are required to meet their advisor at least once a semester, if we've met with that student in the fall and then we meet with them again in the spring and their phone number has changed once or twice, if their address has changed once or twice, or they can't even give you a current address, then that would result in a referral, like to my office. And that referral would say, hey, just sent a referral of concern. That's what it is, to Arion Jet Seals. And, I send a letter, say, hey, This is what I do on campus. I work with students to alleviate those non-academic barriers to their success. You know, there may be issues with housing or financial security. Let's have a conversation. Let me assess what's going on and link you to some resources, get you some information in place, right? If we don't ask the questions, we don't know. Then what'll happen is we'll have a student who is couch surfing, or now they have nowhere to go, and now they've got to return, you know, home and a county over or wherever, or they're staying somewhere across town and they don't have a ride, they're missing classes. A lot of other things happen where if we start to, you know, ask these things on the intake assessments, we learn it early on. One of the things that I likened this too was the just a few questions that people are asked now when you go to the emergency room. As someone, again, that has worked as an advocate and educator in the area of domestic violence, it was very much a win for us. It was a WIN win for us when the nurses and techs started to ask patients coming in, you know, have you gone without food for any period of time? Do you know where your next meal is coming from? Are you safe? Has anyone harmed you mentally, physically? Like, those few questions have presented an opportunity for so many people to get connected with resources, to alleviate barriers to basic needs, and get them resources and information to get them out of unsafe situations. So just those very few questions are very important. So now let's look at some of the key principles of holistic advising. Recognizing that holistic advising is not just advising, it is a whole nother process. It is mentoring, it is educational. You're going to impart wisdom. You are going to create a bonding experience. As I said, building rapport. That is a very important part of this advising process. Respecting diversity and the stories of students that are being served. Every student, every person, every client that you are going to come across is not going to have the same need. You've got to realize that everybody has a different background, a different story, a different experience. One of the things that grinds my nerves the absolute most is when a student is struggling financially and the response that they get is that they just need to go get a job. Go get a job. I could think of about 6 different restaurants that are in walking distance from where my office is even located on my current campus. Students would often be told, that place is hiring, or that restaurant's hiring, that restaurant's hiring. You've got to look at the whole student. Can that student work in that environment? Does that schedule work for them? But some of the things that I ran into, and I had this in my first year, and it was a particular place that some of us had truly gotten involved with because we had some males of color who said, yes, I've been told multiple times that this place down the road is hiring, and myself and my friends, like, we've all gone in there and they don't want to hire us. We have got to realize that people's diversity, their stories and their experiences are real. And I will say that as a Black woman who was a student in college and needed a job, I experienced the same thing. I called a particular restaurant and I decided I need a job. I had not worked in food before or in restaurant, but at that time I said, I can't do the regular customer care and customer service that I needed. The hours weren't working for me. I've got to do something different. This restaurant was a upscale kind of restaurant. They were paying well. And I spoke to someone over the phone and they let me know that they were hiring. And I said, okay, they sent me to the website, and so I could see like how to print off everything. Like, they were very engaging over the phone, do all these things. I said, okay, this is great. You know, I called back after I completed everything and got the supervisor's name so I know who to turn it into, who it was I spoke with earlier. Got all that information. It was great. So there was a couple of contacts in one day, and I was moving quickly, you guys. I needed this job very badly. And I took the application to this place, and you could feel the awkward tension. I was asked to wait. Um, my my application and my resume was taken. Um, the person who greeted me took them to go and speak with whatever the supervisor, the manager, whoever, person in leadership. And then that person came out and let me know that they weren't hiring. Um, and I thought, interesting. I've had multiple conversations with you all over the phone. What changed between this time and that time? You know, what was going on? Why did this happen? Um, and I felt it. I couldn't prove it, so I dismissed it. I've had a couple other situations where that continued. One of the issues had always been is that during that time of my life, I always looked a lot younger than what I was. Not complaining now, but I looked a lot younger. And so I had continued, even after earning a degree, to receive discrimination about my age. I was even flat out asked in an interview with the school system how old I was, which I later, of course, learned that that was illegal. Um, but I was asked how old I was. And when the lady who had me probably by 15 or 20 years stopped the interview and asked me how old I was, and I told her, at that time, I think I was about 20, um, she closed her little booklet, which had like all the interview questions and all their things. And she just sat with her hands clasped on top of the booklet, and she did not engage with me for the rest of the interview. You could tell that her superior was absolutely put out. He was probably also in a moment of panic because he didn't want to correct her in front of me so that I would know that what she did was illegal. But it was a pretty bad experience. It was pretty horrible. I've also had individuals who I know, relatives and loved ones, who have been told that they were too heavy. They weren't shaped right. Their complexion wasn't the right complexion. Literally said these things. You don't fit into this atmosphere. You're a little too dark, or you're a little too heavy, you know? So we cannot just say, just go get a job and fix this problem, because there are a lot of things that other people have to take into consideration when they go and apply for certain jobs. So I really felt it was vital to go into that. We actually had a great conversation when I last did this workshop around this piece and understanding stories of the students that we serve. Because the better we understand their stories and experiences, we can better respect their diversity and know how to present resources that could possibly be true solutions to the issues they're facing. We want to make sure that there's clear communication and that we are actively listening. So don't just listen and nod your head, but actively listen. We want to make sure that we are understanding what the stories are that they're sharing, their experiences, that we're not listening to respond, that we are listening to hear what they're saying, to feel what they're saying, to put ourselves in their feet if we have that ability to practice that level of empathy, so that we can make sure that we are handling their situation with care. Um, we want to make sure that we challenge students to actively participate in the process. We are not, as I said before, we are not coddling them. I have had to go back and forth with people before about the work that I do. This is not about making someone incapable of being able to persist or be able to navigate on their own. This is all about empowering people to be able to be self-sufficient. I am totally about empowerment 100%. We also need to make sure that we assist our advisees with evaluating and re-evaluating their progress towards their goals, because it is going to change. And as it changes, we need to make sure that we have the appropriate conversation with them so that they do not feel like a failure, and that they understand that our goals are going to change. The progress towards our goal may change. You know, I, again, dealt with a lot of things and health issues when I was a college student. And, you know, there were times that I had to slow down. I really had to change my pace. But as I say to people that I work with right now, as long as you are in movement, that is all that matters. You do not have to be in full sprint mode all the time. We are not on a track. That is not what we're doing. And even individuals who run at high school or college or professionally, they will tell you that there is a technique for all the different types of races that they are running, okay? And that is okay for us to apply that same thing when we are working towards our goals. It may not always be something quick and fast and a steady, fast pace. There are going to be times that you may have to take a detour. There are times where you may have to pause, or you may have to move slowly. You may have to slow all the way down because your body, your wellness, your well-being is not going to allow you to move the way you were before. And that is okay. And making sure the students have the opportunity to reevaluate their progress and look at the different ways that they can continue to move forward, and how they can do things a little bit differently is really going to help that student to understand that they've not failed, that they do not need to give up, and that where they are is still okay, and they can still move forward. And we want to assist the students in considering their life goals by helping them relate their experiences, their interests, their skills and values to their career paths. Too many times, as I've said before, I've had students that come in and they are going to be whatever, and then you ask them, "Oh, that's great. What made you go into this field?" "Well, my family owns a practice, and this is just what we do." Okay, so what you do? Is that what you want to do? Let's look at that there. Or maybe it's a job or career that conflicts with some of their actual values. Lord knows I've been presented with some of them myself. I'm bilingual, and being bilingual and having had experience of working in the courts, I was presented with an opportunity that was going to pay me twice the amount of money that I was making. And when I tell y'all, that could not have come at a better time, because I was working 50, 60 hours a week on a very small income. And I was struggling if I had a flat tire, and I was presented a job opportunity by an agency who had observed me in the courtroom multiple times. But when they gave me the breakdown of what the job duties were and the description of the job, my values and my interests totally conflicted. And while it was definitely twice the pay, I had to tell them that it was not a good fit for who I am and what I am choosing to do with my career path. And so it's important for students to be able to look at that. And I feel like also when you work in a field that you can connect to, there's experiences or there's some interest there, it really brings out another level of satisfaction in your life. So that's really helpful to be able to have those conversations with students. And it also ignites a certain type of fire. It kind of lights that pilot for the student to have enough energy to persist, to move forward, especially when they know that someone's interested in that. Let's see. The next is provide materials to your students, to your clients, your advisees. Refer them to others when a referral is an appropriate response. When I meet with students, we do intakes, we have conversations, we explore resources and services and programs, places they've been that worked great, places they've been that did not work well at all, and resources and programs and services that they have no idea even exist. And once we get to the ones that we know that they don't know exist and they're going to work well for them, not just throwing a bunch of resources, y'all, please don't do that to people. Make sure that you have listened to them, that you know what their needs truly are, and then you give them the referral to the agency, to the program that is going to provide the needed support for those issues. Whether the student needs it at that time or they need it 2 or 3 months down the line, it has equipped them with a piece of knowledge that they now know that this program, this service is available to me. They can go ahead and navigate it. They can reach out and see how it works, but they know that it is there. So when an issue arises or concerns happen in that space, they already have a solution in place. That is very, very important to have. So let's look at best practices. That's a big thing for me. There are a lot of things that people just do. They do it out of habit. They do it out of conventional thinking. They do it because it's the way we've always done it. And, in advocacy, in programming, I want to know what's the best practice, because I may be doing something and I may think that it's working well, but if another coordinator or program or campus is doing this thing and they are doing it better and it is shown that it is a best practice, I want to see if that works good for my folks, if that works well for my clients. There's so much information that is out there that is helpful that we don't have to kind of recreate things. We can look at what is best practices in these areas. So according to a report that was done in 2015 with Hanover's Best Practices in Student Retention, Persistence, and Completion report, the following were key findings. Students perceive lack of high quality advising and student support services as a barrier to success. Academic advising and student support services play a role in students' perceived engagement with the college, peers, and their instructors. Personal interaction between students and faculty staff was vital, was very important. And it shows that it providing a tailored advising plan and information to every individual was considered a best practice. So again, we're not going to do a one size fits all. We want to actively listen. We want to know exactly what they need and provide that tailored approach for that particular student. We want to look at being proactive. Please don't wait for everything to flare up. We want to start working on things ahead of time. Meet with the students, but meet them where they are and respect their place. It is very important, as we talk about listening to their stories, that you don't tell them where they should be and where they need to be and all this, that you look at, okay, well, where are you now? And then how can we get you to a place where we believe you would be successful, where we would believe you would be able to persist? But where are you now and how do we move you forward? Active communication between advisors and instructors. One of the things that I've talked about when I have done some consulting is that a lot of institutions still work in situations that are very siloed, and folks don't know what's going on. From the advisors, the instructors, and program coordinators, they all work in the same institutions. They have no idea what's going on. There's got to be active communication between the departments. It's very important. Focus on intensive career exploration and advising efforts on undecided and unclear students. This is very important. Not only does financial aid care that a student has a selected major in place, but in order for that student to commit to something, we need to make sure that they have a lot of support in being able to navigate their ideas about their career and about their life and what they want to have set as their career and educational goals. It is important that campus and community resources. I say all the time when I'm talking and meeting with individuals that, yes, I am the person that does this particular role at my university, but I should not be the only one that is equipped with basic campus and community resources. I go and have many conversations with advisors, with coordinators for the support programs, and provide them with listings of current resources. And sometimes this changes at the different times of the year. So we just came back from winter break. So those conversations that I have with Residence Life is, here are all the resources that students can go and they can eat if they have to stay on campus during the winter break. They can eat in the area since, our dining halls are closed. If we have a student who is struggling with food, here are some programs that will provide a food box. They will deliver the food. They will do all that. So there's a lot of resources, and we just make sure that we navigate those resources during the different times because they change. And then you got to know when to refer out. There have been a many times that I have developed relationships with students, and I truly appreciate that they trust me. But there are times that I have to say, either that is not my role, and I want to make sure that someone who is better equipped to handle that, has been made a part of this conversation, or that you have an opportunity to go and speak or talk to them. I've got to refer you to this person. I've got to refer you to this office. And when it gets to a point to where, a student's needs are just very much excessive, it may be a conversation where there is a convening of sort, where individuals from around campus come together and decide on the best plan of action moving forward. And we may refer that student, to the area that is going to work best for them. Building a level of rapport with these students has been and can be very helpful, but we want to make sure that the students also know that there are other people who may be more equipped to meet their needs, and they may be able to better serve them than I can. We have to also do that for the student, but we have to do it for ourselves as well. Okay. That's a whole nother presentation that I do. We have to do it for our student, for our clients, but we have to do it for ourselves as well. Okay. So what are the issues with holistic advising? So yes, when I go through this, I get a lot of information and people say, oh, that sounds great. Yes, Ariane, that sounds amazing if the world were perfect, but we don't have time. Our caseloads are huge. When are we going to get this training? We barely have time to do this. Some of the programs are smaller. They have instructor-only advisors. How would they ever find the time to be able to do that? Then we have students that have two majors. I pursued two majors myself. So I was meeting with two different advisors from two different programs. And then there's the concern of lack of cultural awareness, lack of commitment or buy-in from the advisors. There's personality differences. So, hey, the student has this advisor and they just don't connect. And then there's the concern of healthy boundaries, which, as I just said with that last slide, we got to know when to refer out. We got to set healthy boundaries. So there definitely have to be boundaries in place. You cannot save people. You cannot make these decisions for these individuals, these students, your clients. You have to have healthy boundaries in place. They cannot have 24-hour access to you. You should not be so over involved in their lives or try to make decisions for them. You are a guide, you are a coach, you are an advisor. That is your role. So these are some of the issues that we've seen. If there are personality differences when a student is just not connecting, a lot of universities are giving the opportunity for students to explore. Yes, this is my advisor, but we're not clicking. Like they're not for me. Whatever that reason is, and the student, you're not going to be able to get to what true holistic advising looks like if you're not connecting with the advisor, if the personality differences or the differences in beliefs are just too much. It's like going to see a therapist or a life coach. If our values, if our ideals, if our personalities are clashing and they're just not working, then you're not going to keep going to that person. You're going to go see someone else, right? And so again, that looks a little different, in education, but it does bring about some of the things that some have started to pay attention to. So navigating, what that looks like, and how students might have a more active involvement in, choosing their advisors or switching advisors if necessary, which does not happen very frequently, but I have had a conversation with students to say, you know what, have you considered having a conversation with your program, with your dean, and let them know, like, we're just not clicking with your advisor. It's not that there's anything malicious going on, but that's just not working. You all are just not working well. Um, that's important. You have to get buy-in. You have to get buy-in, and then that goes up to all the way up to the lack of training. So without appropriate training, you're not going to get buy-in. They've got to understand, the process and how it works. And it's truly not a lot that goes into it. It's very basic, but um, with the training to understand, the different pieces and how you can do it, and that it doesn't have to be overwhelming when it's done well, when it's done with healthy boundaries, when it's done from a place of empowerment, then you are more likely to get more buy-in and more commitment to it. Cultural awareness when it comes to realizing the whole person is very important. But I feel like at this point and where we are, there have been many more conversations, opportunities for learning and engagement about becoming more culturally aware. So this is something that we will continue and constantly have to address, of being more culturally aware. And what can you do now? What can you do now? So you can start by assessing common issues of your students. At the different institutions that has looked different, for me, my current institution, the first thing that was looked at was food security. Um, one of my previous institutions, where I worked with families, students and families, the common issues that we looked at was attendance. When we looked at attendance, what we found was an issue and concern for housing security. And as you begin to navigate and assess the common issues, you can start to explore what struggles your clients and your students are facing. Then process and make note of available resources. So I did a talk the other day. I was invited to speak for a New Year's program, and the topic was progressiveness and creativity in 2024, the year of progressiveness and creativity. And what I have found is that I have been successful in this work, in this field, and I have a lot of success stories because I have to have a way of progressive thinking, and I have to be creative in my thinking. And in doing that, there's a lot of thinking out of the box and problem solving. One of the things that I talked to them about was kind of like a mind mapping and a mapping to connect all of resources to the issues and struggles in place. And again, this was like a New Year's program and service, so this was personal stuff. But I know that it can be applied to clients and students and businesses just the same. But you also want to process what non-academic issues are you hesitant to discuss with students. So where do you say this is where I draw the line? And go on and have that mapped out. So if you get into an area where you're concerned, one of the big ones I know that I see consistently when it comes to mental health, folks are just not sure. They don't want to touch it. That's fine, but you should have some resources and some information. So if you get to some concerning spaces and areas, here's some information that you can provide. However, comma, but I do tell everyone that they need to be trained to have a conversation with an individual on whether they are thinking about harming themselves, whether they have had any type of suicidal thoughts or ideations, and learning how to ask the question and have that conversation. I am currently a certified mental health aide, and that is something that we make sure that we know how to do. You have to be able to be okay. You cannot say, I'm just an instructor, I'm just an advisor, I don't know how to have that conversation. There's so many opportunities for training and practice out there to be able to know how to appropriately have that conversation and ask the question, have you had any thoughts of harming yourself? Have you had any feelings or thoughts, ideations related to suicide? Have you had any thoughts about not wanting to be here, not wanting to live? And then folks are like, oh my gosh, but if they say yes, what do we do with that? And then if you say yes, you say, okay, I want to make sure that I get you to the appropriate people to handle this situation. We have a fully staffed counseling center, and we can do an immediate walk-in if it's an emergency. Or we have these different clinics or hospitals that are nearby. Let me get you to someone who can help you to navigate this. Nothing else matters right now. You matter. So let's address this issue. Let's address this concern that you're facing, that you're dealing with, that currently has you in this space, right? But knowing what you're hesitant to discuss with the students, you can go ahead and seek out the appropriate training and information so that that same hesitancy doesn't persist, okay? Assess your areas of bias and work through them. We all have them. We all have biases. Go on and be honest with yourself. Be truthful about what those biases are, and make sure that you are working through that. Why do you feel that way? What is going on there? And if it is there, how do you navigate getting past it or getting through it when you're meeting with someone? Okay. And then ultimately, one of the things that attendees who have actually attended a workshop with me have had the ability to do with their peers or colleagues who attended with them was to go ahead and begin brainstorming or creating an intake form or an assessment form for their advisors or coordinators that work that will be doing this holistic advising with the students. There was a case study, which we're not going to do. That again is for the actual workshop. And then here's my information. I need to pull up some other information for you all because it has actually changed. All of the resources at everyone's sites that have been so very helpful during the time that I put this presentation together. And what I do want to do is I am going to going to pull up my site. Okay. And okay. So this is the official Holistic Rise site. When I first began doing this workshop and presentation, Holistic Rise was actually fairly new. And I've been doing a lot of work in my full-time roles, but I have had a lot of inquiries. And like I said, especially during and since COVID, people have reached out a great deal to learn more about the work that I've done. So I've done some consulting with more than a handful of universities across the US on how to meet their whole students' needs. So this is Holistic Rise. This is my baby. And my goal is to help people to embrace change, see beyond, and rise above. You can see information here on the site. There's me, the founder and wellness consultant, some of the programs that is offered, just some people who have shared information. This is what I most wanted to make sure that you got was the contact information. So here's my email, holisticrise@consultant.com. And the phone number is 859-429-2089. So it can be reached at holisticrise@consultant.com. And I can be reached at 859-429-2089. Let's see. Show little things, some little projects that I've been working on. I'll be placing some things here. These are just some journals that have been put together that were developed based off of conversations and talks and workshops. I'm working on another that is going to be uploaded as well. And well, there's actually two. One that is going through editing process, another that I'm currently have the workshop that has been done, but I'm trying to put together the book and the journal that goes with it. I just presented that at the University of Kentucky's annual Women's Forum. It was amazing, and that is Bleeding Hearts. Attention, bleeding hearts, don't bleed out. That's good, right? So I'm working on that as well. So I'll be posting those projects here. There was a blog, some information before I started having more conversations in person with individuals. I just posted some things here, but I've tried to do better with social media. I'm really trying, you guys, with social media. So I've been posting more on social media pages, mainly Facebook right now. I'm also currently working on a YouTube page that will be available soon as well. As Holistic Rise has developed over the years, I've had to acknowledge that there are some things that are just in place that I need to go back and explore. Again, this presentation that I just went through, and I almost did the entire thing with you all. I spent a little more time than I had actually initially planned to do. But after receiving emails and people finding me on Indeed, or not Indeed, on LinkedIn, people finding me on LinkedIn and saying, hey, you know, we found your paper, we found your presentation, we want to know more information about this. What are things looking like now? So I realized that, you know, I'm sharing this information is already out there. This information is there, it is available to you. It's something that was covered and published. So I want to make sure that more people have access to it. I want to make sure that you are aware that I'm currently working on a piece that is more up to date, that is more present, and that is up to date, and there's more focus on the present, our present times, navigating COVID and what that looked like for clients and students when we're looking at empowerment, holistic wellness, holistic advising, education, just looking at all those pieces. So I want to make sure that I have gone back and developed that out and adapted it to things that have been explored more recently. I thank you for using the presentation. I thank you for your interest in the topic. I want to encourage you to reach out to me with questions. If you would like a workshop or to do consulting, could definitely have that conversation as well. But I want to make sure, you know, this is a service. This workshop, this presentation is made available. That's a gift. It's free of charge. It's something that exists out there. It's just everyone doesn't know how to get to it. So it's my hope that in this new year, that this will be easily accessible to individuals. You know that, of course, it comes from Ariane Jet Seals and Holistic Rise, and that you also know how to contact me moving forward as you are navigating how to help your clients, help your students to embrace change, see beyond, and rise above. So again, I thank you very much for being here and tuning in. And I promise this will not be the last.